we're early on in the day. Any offers of support, suggestions, recommendations, partnerships, are very open to it. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for our speakers so far. There's some fantastic information there. So got some great ideas. Things can be energised and move forward. I'd like to go on to the next part of our workshop today. So we've talked about some background, we've had some examples, but there's a couple of fundamental sort of structural issues that we should be looking into. And so in this part of the workshop, two particular topics for discussion. The first one is about getting effective leadership support for initiatives such as the one we've heard of before, and others that could be applied in different locations and contexts. The second issue is how you go about financing these activities. So I'd like to introduce Kate Brown. Kate's going to talk about the first topic.
And I'm actually, in terms of talking about kind of catalysing leadership, which is the topic that I'm focusing on, I'm actually going to talk about the partnership and how the Global Island Partnership is focused on catalysing leadership. And so the Global Island Partnership, and please wave at me if I'm speaking fast, because I really do speak very fast.
They're waving.
Thank you. No, I lost my place. I just really wanted to acknowledge, before I start, I see one of the steering committee of our partnership crouching down at the back there, because I think he thinks I'm going to point him out. But Dr. Spencer Thomas from Grenada is on the GLISP steering committee, and I can't actually see anyone else here that's on our steering committee. But the Global Island Partnership was formed actually back in 2005. And it was requested by two presidents, two leaders of two island countries, the president of Palau at the time, President Tommy Ramagasau, and the president of the Seychelles, President Michel from the Seychelles. And they wanted a partnership that was not just about small island developing states, but it was about small island developing states as islands and countries that have islands. That's why we work together with Hawaii. And European islands sort of coming together around common issues. And they wanted this partnership really focused on the four things that you see, if I was to summarise what they said at the time around these four words here. They wanted to mobilise leadership in islands around the world. They wanted islands at all levels to make commitments to doing something. They wanted to help foster collaboration between islands, and that's why we do a lot of these things internationally, so trying to bring islands together to hear from each other. And I have to say the last half hour was really wonderful, just hearing both from the Caribbean and from Hawaii what they're doing in this kind of new green economy or green growth approaches that are floating around in the world. And they really, the point of all of that is not just for talking at international events. The point of leadership, commitment and collaboration is to see a difference being made in island countries or island territories or island states, and that's really to promote action. And there's actually quite a few people in the room that I can see that were involved in the early days of the GLISP startup, and I can see who were behind a lot of the thinking about how this partnership would form. I'll just move on to the next slide. So, as I was saying, our partnership, it's not an organisation. There's only 1.5 staff, which is me and Jessica Robbins, who's sitting here. It's a partnership of these three presidents. We now have the Prime Minister of Grenada as our newest co-chair, and President Torrebion, the new president of Palau, is our other co-chair, President Michelle, and they really give the partnership kind of the leadership and the thinking that it needs to move forward. And as the partnership has developed and grown over time, since 2005 when it was formed, we've really worked on engaging other island leaders in the partnership. And so that mobilising leadership, it's kind of a little bit like a peer support group for leaders, the Global Island Partnership, part of the partnership focus. We also want to kind of help island countries make things happen. So that's really where there's a focus on trying to catalyse commitments. How do we get something to happen? And that's why we've really been supportive of what Hawaii is doing, and really the person that Chippa was talking about earlier who is supporting them is Audrey Newman, who I know many of you would know, and who was also one of the people that founded our partnership. So there's a lot of kind of cross-fertilisation. And this really important issue around facilitating collaboration, and I think what I've sort of learned, I used to be working in Samoa about 3 years ago in the Regional Environment Program, and I hear a lot from the Pacific that they have, you know, a whole range of issues. What I've learned actually is that islands off the coast of Sweden and islands in the Caribbean and islands in Hawaii, they have the same issues and they talk about it in the same way. There just really isn't ways for them to come together and share solutions. How do we deal with these problems that we have as islands? And that's really where this partnership is focused. So those three kind of really key things. And as I said earlier, it's a partnership of islands, of island countries and countries that have islands. So, and we saw Aulani put our map up earlier. In terms of what has happened within the partnership and this whole idea of catalysing leadership, the partnership's first kind of big commitments were commitments as in leaders standing on a stage on an international platform and saying, this is what we want to do. And came out of Micronesia with the Micronesia Challenge, and also at the same time the Phoenix Islands Protected Area was announced. This was back in 2006. So we have, I think Willie may touch a little bit on the Micronesia Challenge in a minute. But that was 5 countries coming together and saying, okay, we need to do something. We've got problems. And we can sit here kind of making lists and telling people internationally that we have problems, but as countries, we can do something about this. We can try and see what we can do as countries. And so the President of Palau really challenged the other 4 entities. So 2 are US states, 1 is its territories, sorry. 2 are US territories and 3 are independent countries who had a relationship and had been working together. And they signed up to this kind of big global goal, a big goal to protect 20% of their nearshore and 30% of their terrestrial resources, sorry, it's the other way, by 2020. And so that was kind of, at the time it was done, it was really amazing that presidents of small island countries had said, let's put out there these big goals that we're going to try and achieve. And, you know, so over the last, that really led to the development of an 8-country another challenge. So that's what the Micronesia Challenge in the Caribbean in 2008, 2 years later, was announced to do fairly similar things. And Spencer really was one of the people working together from Grenada to sort of learn from what Palau and these other countries had done and think about how the Caribbean might actually mobilise itself. And then there's a whole range of other ones. There's Kiribati in the centre there. There's the Seychelles is now trying to develop a big Western Indian Ocean coastal challenge, which they're looking at the east coast of Africa and all the islands. Whoever really wants to work with them, focus more on climate change issues. And so you see there, this is very high level people talking about things that we usually don't see them talking about at international things or even in their country. And it's really, really exciting. And we know that the partnership has mobilised a lot of resources. So that's not me and Jessica mobilising resources. This is countries saying, this is what we want to do, and people saying, we want to help you do it. We want to help you kind of be successful. So, I'm sure I took that because I think we might run out of time. But we also, as a partnership, we really want to focus on how do we kind of move the agenda forward on some of these big issues that are important for islands. And so we've been working for the last couple of years on trying to look at how do we get leadership around ecosystem-based adaptation and mitigation and invasive species, really important issues for islands. And some of what you heard earlier with the Hawaii Green Growth Initiative is really how do we link conservation and sustainable livelihoods, the big announcements and challenges that people have announced, to what people are discussing in the development and green economy kind of area, which we're very disconnected. And so we've been doing a kind of events, enabling heads of government to say these messages. These are really important to our country, these are important, we're doing things about it. How can you help us help? Thanks. Sorry, this was sent in some time ago. And I think I just wanted to reiterate actually a really great speech by our President James Michel from the Seychelles, who's been a wonderful chair of GLISPA. But he was really calling out to fellow leaders to come together under our partnership to advance the common goal to halt global biodiversity loss, deal with climate change, and ensure that there's a sustainable future for island people and the planet. And I think the message spoke that both Alani and also Nicole had about island people thinking about how islands really have a critical role to play in showing people how to deal with things. This is kind of what President Michel is really referring to, and the way that they look at it. This is actually a picture of the steering committee of GLISPA, which includes countries and NGOs and countries and NGOs that are really interested in trying to support this partnership to be successful. And I think one of the places that people see us a lot is at these international events. We always have a reason for doing things. We don't just sort of turn up at things. And we've really been working at kind of strategic events since 2005, trying to get and enable islands to kind of make these messages and have a perspective and have a kind of a hand in the game of what's going on internationally, which we often saw that they didn't have. So how do we take this great leadership and translate it into influence over kind of what's happening internationally? And there's a whole range of events there. I won't go into them in detail. But here, we just had a big event in Rio, which was hosted by the President of Indonesia and the Prime Minister of Grenada, which we did together with the Nature Conservancy. And so the Prime Minister of Grenada was hosting that event on behalf of these other co-chairs. So he was and working together with Indonesia to kind of think about for islands, and Indonesia wasn't particularly thinking of these things from an island perspective, but how do we do things that help islands? How do we do things that help take us forward? We have this big meeting like Rio +20, we all think that maybe some of it's not so successful, particularly in terms of the outcome document, but how do these leaders come together and do something that's going to be helpful over the longer term for each of their communities, the people that live in islands? And we're planning actually to kind of change a little bit how our partnership works and have more of a smaller steering committee and a kind of broader strategy group that helps think about some of these issues. How do we find the right place to do things? What do we focus on as a partnership? And how we use kind of this amazing energy that this partnership has. And this was an original, this comes from 2005. Kofi Annan was actually at our first event, which was sort of the precursor GLISPA event during the Mauritius strategy meeting. But he, when he was the UN Secretary General, came to an event to kind of support what was going on, support the leadership of places like Palau and the Seychelles, who were sort of talking at that event. And so I think I'd just like to say that we're learning a lot from this partnership. We're learning a lot from kind of what motivates the people to engage in things. And I think, as Nicole was saying before, this whole idea of kind of working together with other island leaders, it's really powerful. It's surprisingly powerful. And I guess that's where we're going to continue to invest our time as a partnership and hope that we can actually achieve something successful. And we have actually, just quick advertisement. We have 2 other small 1-hour side events on this week. One on Tuesday in the Career Pavilion, which is more focused on leaders valuing nature and some of the outcomes from Rio +20. And another one on Monday at 1:10, they're both at 1:10, focused on lead up to COP11, where we're having an island summit during COP11, which is going to be hosted by the government of India and the government of the Seychelles.
We'd just like to introduce our next speaker.
Sorry, yes, Nick did instruct me to introduce the next speaker. I'd like to introduce Willie Costa from the Micronesia Conservation Trust. And actually, Willie and I share a birthday. We were born the same day of the same year, so it's kind of funny that you have us wait.
Thank you. Our birthday is coming up in 2 weeks, so we accept the early birthday presents. Yeah, so really, I don't think that that's the title that I would have put on this presentation, but I didn't do it. So let me see how I will do with somebody else making the presentation for me. But basically what I would like to talk about is how you sustain the global challenges that our leaders have been putting in place, like the Micronesia Challenge, the Caribbean Challenge, and all the other large initiatives that have popped up or have been influenced by the Micronesia Challenge. And as we started to really provide support to our local implementing partners on the ground, we are finding that there is an intrinsic link between conservation trust funds and climate adaptation and mitigation funds. So, the requests that are coming to us from the local people who are implementing local action on the ground is really making us think that we need to address those 2 issues at the same time. Just about my organization, the Micronesia Conservation Trust is really the only conservation trust in Micronesia, in the Micronesia region. In 2006, we were selected as the financing mechanism for the Micronesia Challenge Initiative. And MCT currently manages 2 different types of funds. We manage a set of endowment funds and advised sinking funds. MCT is currently applying to become the national implementing entity to the adaptation fund, and we're going through the process right now. And in that process, we have been able to improve, internal control systems, risk management procedures, and develop guidance for our different committees within our board. So we've really improved from going through that process, and just wanted to share that for those who are thinking about doing a similar process. What are conservation trust funds? They're private grant-making institutions that provide sustainable financing for conservation. They're financing mechanisms that raise and invest funds to make grants to NGOs and CPOs. And in many of our cases in Micronesia, we've also been providing funding to local governments and in fact even to some of the state government agencies. It's a public and private partnerships that provide technical assistance and grants to strengthen the institutional capacity of our grantees. Not just their institutional capacity, but also their technical capacity on the ground. And we've also been coordinating learning networks. We have several learning networks that we are coordinating. So that's what conservation trust funds can coordinate. Why are we talking about integrating climate change? Well, consequences of climate change have brought a sense of urgency, to our regions, and we think that with that and with the increased financial resources that are coming with climate change, we can actually boost up the work on conservation itself, especially because they are so linked together. We also know that developing countries lack the capacity to access, distribute, and use resources for climate change action. We have very few of our local partners who are able to go out and compete and write these very large grants that are very competitive, coming from the large donors. So the Micronesia Conservation Trust and other conservation trust funds actually do those proposals on their behalf, and then we come back and make a more simple process for them to access those funds. We also know that conservation trust funds have proven effective for conservation efforts and would be equally well suited to channel climate change funding. We feel that way about the Micronesia Conservation Trust and some of the trust funds that we actually know. As you can see from this model, the conservation trust expertise you see on the left of this deal with the protected areas, wildlife protection,